Welcome back to the Convo Couch, everybody. I am Pasta Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella.
And Johnny Sue is spinning on those ones and twos. And today in the studio on the couch, we have a special guest, Tijerina.
Jamie Tijerina. Thank
Tijerina
you for being
is here. She was going to run for LA City Council, District 14. She was a write-in candidate, but now just recently you have exited the race. So we're going to bring you in here today to talk about a lot of fun stuff going on. Because we still want your brilliant mind in here.
And also because you have said you're Yang Gang, so I really wanted your perspective on, an outsider's perspective. I'm a Bernie supporter. He's I was going to say Warren, a Tulsi.
You dare say that.
Because she's on my mind. And we're going to talk about the situations pretty much, what everybody's talking about with what was said in the audio between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Now, yesterday we did a show with Nico House where we went off and said all the things from here to Sunday. But we want to just have our show to talk about the specifics and the reactions that many are having online, because there is a huge battle right now, whether we unite the Progressive Party or the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, or whether we stick to our guns and say, no, enough is enough, as Bernie says, and fight the power. So,
give us a little bit of insight about yourself real quick, and then just kind of spin right into the Yang Gang, why you support him, and we'll kind of get into everything we need to get into. So go right ahead.
All right, perfect. So again, my name is Jamie Tijerina. I was raised in the Northeast and East Side communities of Highland Park, Garvanza, Lincoln Heights. I always have to remember to say Garvanza because that term was in disuse for most of the earliest part of my childhood until about like 1996, when they revived it as part of the neighborhood. And so my day job is that I'm a scientific researcher at Caltech. I work in the flow cytometry facility there, operating a cell sorting machine. And outside of my work, I do a lot of activism. I got my start doing activism formally as a member of the Historic Highland Park Neighborhood Council. I did that for about 2.5 years. I became a budget advocate for Region 8, and I recently, after my campaign, returned to that position. So I have my first meeting as the Region 8 budget advocate on Saturday again, so I'm excited for that. I wrote a paper about the legacy of redlining in Los Angeles and how it's led us to where we are today with a lot of the issues we're having and some of the conversations that we're having about how our future is going to unfold. And I also am a party delegate for Assembly District 51. And I am president of the Highland Park Heritage Trust, which is a nonprofit that deals with historic and cultural preservation in the Northeast area and in the communities of the Arroyo. And so I entered the race for Council District 14. I was actually, after Kevin De Leon and Monica Garcia, I was the first candidate to enter the race after them. A lot of people were kind of looking like, the right and left, like, okay, is anyone else going to go in? And, it was one of those choices that was a tough choice, but not really. Because, I felt like there's a lot of issues in our neighborhood that just weren't being brought up. There's people who run because they don't like the other candidates. And for me, it wasn't about them at all. And it was about, there's no one under 40, no one under 35 on LA City Council. Yet, for example, in downtown, which is part of CD14, 30 to 34 is the largest age group. And when we look at, we have two major colleges, universities in the district, Occidental College, Cal State LA. We also have Keck School of Medicine, and there's also other school, there's K through 12 education, but what we're really not focusing on is what happens to all those kids after they graduate. What happens? We have some of the highest levels of student loan debt in zip codes in CD14. And we also had a loss of about 800 jobs in 2018, according to the business reports that are out there. And when you think about displacement and gentrification and what those conversations are right now, we're not talking about how 800 jobs is 800 heads of household. That's blocks worth of people who no longer have what could be a job for a primary breadwinner, because a lot of those jobs are in manufacturing and education. We have, fashion district. There's a lot of underutilized warehouse space because those jobs went away. My grandfather, when he was alive, he was a machine operator at a plant in El Sereno.
Yeah.
That's it doesn't exist there anymore. And so like that's just one anecdotal example, but we have data to back it up, in the form of that. And when we talk about who's getting displaced, it's the young people who grew up in the neighborhood and can't afford to move home.
Yeah.
And who are getting pushed towards STEM degrees, for example. And when they come back, there's minimal opportunity for them. We have all of these issues. And that's just like one set of it. And I just thought it was really, really important to start talking about this in a different way and also just get representation, because right now I just don't feel like that voice is, I don't feel represented as somebody who grew up in the neighborhood, went to school, came home, and found everything to be in a lot of ways different. But then when you open the hood and you look under the surface, all that disinvestment's still there.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to talk about all of this and bring up these you can't solve a problem if you won't talk about it or admit that it exists.
Yeah.
And so that, that's important to me. I lost people to, mental health issues in our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to go through some of the hardships and the things that I've been through, because if I've been through them, I know I'm not the only one. And so, I was running a grassroots campaign. I was like, no fossil fuel money, no developer money, no charter school money. Like, no money from anywhere. I don't know who I was taking money from, because there was so many qualifications.
No money from anywhere. But
yeah, like no, and so no money.
Is that why you are a Yang Gang supporter, or and you believe in a UBI? And
that's there's a few reasons why I'm Yang Gang. Looking at how it specifically affects the 14th district. So going back, a lot of his talking points about automation, manufacturing jobs leaving, the 14th district is a great example of that. In Los Angeles, in a big major city, not even just a rural area where that's also a really huge problem. And a lot of those people feel they're being left behind. And a lot of those issues are what got Trump elected.
Yeah.
Or part of it, because there's many, but it's a big piece, because, that saying, it's the economy, stupid. People notice when they don't have, when you're poor, you notice you're poor. Like it's when you don't have the things you need, you notice when you don't have your health care, when you're in debt, and so the 14th district's a great example of that. And that's why considering a pilot to happen in the 14th district, it would be financially feasible, given what it costs, and what I had read it cost in other places that did a pilot. It would be feasible we couldn't, the city of LA couldn't float the whole UBI, but a pilot would certainly help, even though there's other pilots, because more data is always helpful, especially in a big major city like LA. What LA does, a lot of other cities worldwide look to. And so I think that it would be an important place to look at that. Looking at the safety net in a different way, and looking at it in a way that could potentially reduce some of the stigma. Because I don't talk about it that much because there's a lot of stigma, but there were points in my life when, food stamps was a thing for me. Yeah. And I think that stigma really hurts people. It hurts kids, and it hurts families, and it makes people feel bad. And so I think, having an option there that doesn't have that will help to destigmatize, it's going to be really, really helpful for the future. And also just having that safety net. If you're in a job that's soul sucking, that's really bad for your mental health, where you're being abused, and mistreated, you have another option. That's really important.
So just I guess shifting over to, you liking Andrew Yang, a UBI is wonderful, but there's also a federal jobs guarantee. There's also things that we could do. The system right now, you're right, the economy, the gentrification, all of these issues that we're dealing with, gives us a lot of things to think about as progressives, as people that do not necessarily want to be a part of this establishment. So how do you feel about getting $1,000 and then all of a sudden maybe other things happen, like your rent still, without rent control, the rent's going to go up. Without other sort of blocks, these things are still going to affect our economy. I'm all for UBI. I've seen it work in other countries in Europe. However, I do think we need some sort of social protections, right? Like some.
There have to be, and I think it wouldn't exist in a vacuum. And I think that's why doing more pilots is really important because, like you said, you've seen it work, but more data, in places that have more robust rent control scenarios versus those that don't.
Yeah.
And seeing what it does. I mean, up to a certain point, there's only so much inflation that could happen logically, because people will push back if something's excessively expensive by not buying it. Like there's a lot of issues with our markets right now because unfortunately there are instances of corporations fixing the government in their favor so that policies happen to favor to basically quash competition to do their work for them when they should just be providing better service and a better product. They're like, nah, we just think that this is a zero-sum game and we're going to try and find a way to squash competition. I mean, look at, on a micro level, look at street vending, right? Brick and mortar businesses I understand because like it's very expensive to run a small business. But the other piece of that is if somebody couldn't afford to go eat at an expensive sit-down restaurant, they weren't going to go anyway. If they're eating like food from a street vendor, that's because that's what they felt like eating. It's just because you are worried about the competition. Like there's competition that's healthy. It's not like people only eat at one restaurant ever. People like choice. It's very important to have that. And so weaponizing the government with high city permitting fees to squash the competition, that's not how we should be looking at things.
Yeah, and LA has a habit of doing that. I had a mobile food vehicle before, and I couldn't exist them within LA because the bureaucracy, mainly the lobbyists from the brick and mortar restaurants, really pushed a lot of the street vendors aside. There's only certain spots you can go and still enjoy those street vendors. What about Yang? Do you want to talk about
no, I just wanted to go ahead and, because Johnny is on a time. So I just wanted to go ahead and get the show started with our main point, which is Elizabeth Warren's quote. Did you just call me a liar on national television? I want to talk about that because I have seen, like I said, people calling for us to be kind to her, to pacify everything, even though this is like the third or fourth incident where she had sort of attacked Bernie Sanders in a way that he never attacked her. So let's just go ahead and show the audio.
Show the audio.
Hear the audio.
Hear the audio.
I think you called me a liar on national TV.
What?
I think you called me a liar on national TV.
Let's not do it right now. You want to have that discussion, we'll have that discussion. You called me, you told me. All right, let's not do it now.
I don't want to get in the middle of it. I just want to say hi, Bernie.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Guys, I just want to say hi.
Can we just have a moment of silence for Tom Steyer?
Listen, everybody's got to stop picking on Tom Steyer.
He just wanted to say hi.
He just wanted to
He
say
did.
hi.
He was just being really, really nice
This
and
was
whatnot.
his 15 minutes of Tom Steyer.
Can we give some love to Tom?
fame,
He
because
kept his mouth shut, too. He didn't say anything. He could have leaked that stuff right away. He kept his mouth shut, and he let CNN do that.
Okay, so first of all,
good for him, though, for real.
I'm going to point this out, and I want to hear you guys' opinion. I want to point this out. CNN absolutely planned this with Warren. I mean, it was a hot mic moment. She absolutely knew what she was doing. First of all, CNN broke the story initially about the talking about women couldn't be president. CNN and Politico were involved in all of these situations before. This is the mainstream media that has always been against Bernie Sanders. And it was too perfect. The entire debate, it seemed like they all had some sort of script, some sort of agenda. Bernie Sanders, of course, got the questions asked of him that were the hardball questions that others did not get. And when this happened, it was just so quick, like, bam, and they held on to it, and then they released it right when they wanted to. I want to hear your opinion, Jamie, and then Pasta on that, on how it was done.
So in general, when I first heard just kind of rewinding, when I first heard the news come out about, Elizabeth Warren saying that Bernie Sanders didn't think a woman could win president, it just felt like one of those narratives that, unfortunately, there's people out in our country who feel that way, but it didn't seem like it should have been blown up because it's something that has been unfortunately weaponized against women for a very long time, like that we don't believe it. And I just don't think that giving it air is constructive, just like at all, because even if you say you don't agree with it, people don't always hear the word "I don't agree." They hear it exists. They just hear that the end of the statement exists, that a woman can't be president, which is not accurate. Like there's women presidents, women leaders all over the world, just not here, and or enough of them in other parts of government. But I just don't think that giving that sentiment airtime is helpful to trying to advance women. I understand if she felt that if that happened, then I understand her feelings about it are valid and they shouldn't be dismissed. But I also just don't think that right now that kind of conflict is really what is going to be helpful for our party, because whoever is the nominee is going to have to deal with any attacks that came to them from other Democrats getting weaponized by Trump against them again.
So that's an interesting point you make, and I think we're going to touch on that point real quick. What did you want to say?
No. Listen, I've said it before. I think this is a ridiculous statement.
Yeah.
It's just, it's absurd to think, anybody think for 1 second that Bernie Sanders said a woman can't be president. He said it over 30 years ago. And in fact,
he said that
asked
a woman
her,
can be president.
He said a woman can be president. To say
Multiple times.
Yeah, it was a
Videos.
ridiculous statement. And to be honest with you, the way that if Elizabeth Warren did really feel those ways about it, she should have talked to Bernie Sanders in private and talked about it, and he would have clarified that. Like, come on, Elizabeth, that's ridiculous.
Or not mentioned it a few weeks before the Iowa primary when her numbers went down and his started surging. Let's not pretend that didn't happen here.
Yeah.
Let's look at how Bernie Sanders has been smeared continuously since he started surging by the entire political establishment, including the arm of the mainstream media. Let's not pretend that this isn't happening. And I want to kind of push back on that point. That is kind of where I want to go with this. So a lot of people are saying we need to completely wipe this spat out. This is just not productive. This is going to give Trump an impetus to attack Democrats on. But here's my objection to that point. My objection is this isn't about the Democrats and this isn't about Trump. This is about the people. This is about co-option. This is about the progressive movement being co-opted by people like Elizabeth Warren who call themselves progressive. I would have less of a problem with Elizabeth Warren if she ran her campaign and stood by what she was and said, okay, I don't believe in Medicare for all. I believe in a public option. I still believe in our status quo foreign policy. I still believe in this. No, she has backtracked from every single issue she said she believed in. And now all of a sudden she's the victim. Because she brought up this story, which I agree, I don't think she should have brought up because it's not true, because the only two people in that room were her and Bernie Sanders, and even her campaign people were like, oh, she must have embellished the story because that's not what she told us happened after an hour or however time after we saw her. And so my whole point is, and I want to hear, I want to see the reactions. I want us to look at the reactions of people on Twitter, because Twitter is divided. We have many progressives like myself who are hardcore leftists and who are sick and tired of getting told by the Democratic Party that we need to unite the party, that we need to unite progressive, that we need to actually shut up and stop complaining because this is helping Trump. I believe that what's helping Trump is the Democratic Party lying to the people and pretending that they're going to put a progressive label on people who aren't progressive. And if we don't speak out now, it's Donald Trump is going to win again. And that's what to me is what is the main issue here.
Well, I agree with this, actually kind of what's happened to the progressive label. Like, what does that mean?
Right.
Because everybody says they're progressive, but what does it actually mean if you're a progressive Democrat? And I identify as progressive, but I don't generally use the term because it's lost its meaning. Like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, I know what it means to me, but like, what does it mean to everyone else? And I just don't think, I don't think it's helpful anymore. I think we really need to look at what are our ideas? Like, what do we believe? And unfortunately, the hard part is like, I like to go and facts, I like to live by facts and data, but there's a lot of dogma to a certain point that has to be associated with all of this, because we don't know. We're in the unfamiliar. We don't know what is definitely going to work until we actually try it and do the experiment of, hey, like, will Medicare for all without a public option work? We won't know until the U.S. tries it and gives it a chance to either succeed or fail or do whatever it's going to do, given the conditions that end up being.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's I think the hard part. How do we use terminology that sort of lost its meaning, that doesn't really mean anything anymore, labels that don't mean anything anymore, when we don't look at what our values are?
Well, I mean, my point is the thing that really bothers me is that, okay, we're talking about this, but why are they still trying to use the same tactics as these candidates? I mean, to me, that's what really puts the stamp of the label of the establishment. It's not only just the money they take or who they're backing, who they're supporting, but the tactics they use. And this particular tactic seems way in line with the corporate Democrats, who seem to use the divide and conquer kind of mentality. And we see the same thing happen over and over again. And this particular tactic is actually what helped put Donald Trump in the White House. So my question is, why, Elizabeth? Why do it? Why use it? Are you that desperate that you're going to use one of these tactics? I mean, I know the Iowa caucus is coming up. Bernie is surging, but the establishment let all their chambers out of the gun before the very first vote was casted in Iowa, less than a month away.
And it's here. This isn't just anybody doing this to Bernie. This isn't even Hillary Clinton doing this to Bernie, because this is, again, the same playbook Hillary used in 2016 by trying to, they were putting out that essay Bernie wrote. They were smearing him as a sexist, misogynist, whatever. It's the same thing all over again. Problem is, you can't use the same thing again on a people that felt like they were cheated, and expect it to work on when the economy has worsened since then. I mean, Bernie Sanders' average donation in 2016 was $27. Now it is like $18. That's not because people decided to donate less because they just felt like they wanted a new number. No, that's because people don't have the money, because our system has failed the working class. And so when people on Twitter, whether they're electeds like Ilhan Omar that we're going to show in a minute, or whether they're journalists who have these blue check marks or who make a lot of money, they tell you, they're like, stop dividing the party, grow up. It's just, you need to unite, the people. This is helping Donald Trump. They wag their finger. To me, that is wagging your finger at a poor people, at the working class, who are fed up with being told that they need to shut up and unite behind a label. Because you're right, we need to figure out, what does it mean to be progressive? What do these languages mean? What do these words mean when we don't stand by and apply them when it comes to practical, tangible mechanisms? And that is what I am so obviously done with. I'm just so done with these platitudes of unity behind what? We're divided because we don't agree. We should have 5 parties right now. We should have however many parties as people differ. If we were in Europe right now, Bernie Sanders would be considered close to being a centrist. If we were in England, let's be honest. Elizabeth Warren is a Republican in Europe. I mean, she was a Republican 30 years ago. And another thing I'm going to bring up is what she tried to do was during the debate, when she tried to say that she was the only Democrat that was able to beat a Republican incumbent 30 years ago. That wasn't true either. And it's like,
God, I don't know, snake math.
They're trying to snake math. They're trying to focus on Bernie Sanders and his supporters disrupting the party, when it is actually them being silenced, and it's a form of gaslighting. Because any sort of protest you have, it's like, no. Just stop right here. Don't worry about it. Let's ignore it. Let's just move on and defeat Donald Trump. We're not going to defeat Donald Trump if we don't address these issues that these people have.
Yeah, and it's the cleanup crew too as well. It's the same kind of method. Like, we got to unite. We're going to go on Ilhan's tweet right here, but you have something to say. But it's the same type of mentality again. We have to shut up and just unite. Despite what's happened, you were going to say.
Well, I like that you bring up what happened in 2016 with Bernie, because earlier, we talked about one of the reasons why I decided to be Yang Gang. And one of the other reasons, aside from policy and, good people, is what happened in 2016 to Bernie was wrong. We all know that he got robbed. Like when I was in grad school, during 2015 when all this was happening and people were saying, oh, he has no chance. I'm like, get on my college campus, then back and try and tell me that.
Yeah.
Come back and try and tell me that. And obviously, like I knew that just seeing people, how they were energized about Bernie, that he was getting traction because he was resonating with all of us. Like I was, a few months away from finishing my MBA, being like, oh my God, I'm going to be in even more debt, given the risk that I took, on myself to get education and, my ability to be able to get a job in the markets that we had. And I'm like, he was resonating, when he was talking about all of these things with all of us, all my undergrad friends, all my grad school friends, because he was right about what's happening. And those people got, clotheslined out of the party, basically. Yeah. And I see it happening again for Yang 2020 also. And I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's right. There's a lot of really good people who are inspired by Bernie to run. I was one of them. Like there would have been no Jamie 2020 without Bernie 2016.
Exactly.
No
and
couch.
I think there wouldn't have been no CONVO couch.
Yeah.
There wouldn't have been, I think there wouldn't have been Yang 2020 without it. And I think, going forward, there's a lot of other campaigns who are inspired by Yang that there wouldn't be that if
right.
It all came from there. And if we don't embrace people and genuinely welcome them and be willing to accept that dissent, because dissent is healthy. Like on the LA City Council, everyone hates that the votes are all unanimous except for like the lone Republican. And you know what, sometimes you have to be like, look, I don't agree with you, Republican person, but like at least you're down to dissent, because you need dissent. It's healthy, it's normal.
Absolutely.
And being willing to stand alone, which is also a big reason I really like Tulsi Gabbard, is being willing to stand alone in what's right is so important. Yeah. Even if nobody's where you're at yet, you have to do it. The movement doesn't start because everyone all agreed at once. It usually starts like one person has an idea and then other people, oh, that's a great idea, let's talk about it. And it starts simply, and you need to have the courage to stand alone sometimes.
I'm glad that the night we met that I yapped your ear off about Tulsi Gabbard and it stuck whatnot. So there we go and stuff.
Well, no, I mean, her present vote to me was I would have made a vote like that. To be honest, because I think
Stand
impeachment,
alone.
the way it was done, is not right. I think he should be impeached, but I don't think he should have been impeached on that. So let's go ahead and take a look at Ilhan Omar's tweets.
Let's not give Trump an arsenal of attacks to use against us. Bernie Sanders is not a sexist. Elizabeth Warren is not a snake. Let's stay focused on the task at hand, defeating Donald Trump in November and fighting for the America we deserve. There goes that dolphin over there. And I would give it a bunch of malarkey because here we go once again.
Sounds so nice though, Pasta.
No.
So it sounds nice, right?
Ilhan.
It sounds nice,
That's
but
a
here's
bunch
the
of
thing.
malarkey.
It is a bunch of malarkey. Thank you, Joe. Finally, something we agree on. You're overlooking the why people are so upset, and you cannot do that.
Yeah.
Not as electeds, not as people running for office, not as anything. You need to look, and let's look at her second tweet too. She says Trump wants progressives pitted against each other. Corporate media wants progressives pitted against each other. Billionaires want progressives pitted against each other. Pitting progressives against each other weeks before Iowa caucus hurts all of us. Okay, I agree that all these people want progressives pitted against each other.
But Warren's not a progressive.
Exactly. Warren, I would not. And what does that mean to me? So to a lot of us in the Bernie Sanders camp who consider ourselves democratic socialists or who consider ourselves socialist libertarians or just completely anti-establishment, Warren, although better than Joe Biden by policy-wise decisions, although I'm starting to rethink
Ain't
that.
saying much.
Not saying much. Is still part of that status quo. It's still part of that mechanisms that have led us to lose to Donald Trump and will lead us to lose to Donald Trump again. So when you're completely overlooking why we're so dissentful against the idea of simply shutting up and just, saying, okay, well, forget about it. We need to defeat Donald Trump. We have nothing to stand on to defeat Donald Trump if we give in to this sort of backstabbing by Warren. And let's not forget that the person that did this weeks before the Iowa caucus wasn't Bernie Sanders, who did everything he could to refrain from attacking her, whose campaign has said, do not attack any other candidates, do not speak ill of any other candidates. We're just going to run on Bernie's policies alone. All of that was started by Elizabeth Warren. So let's not pretend that this is something like we can have there are two sides argument to this. There's no two sides to this. And
I used to like sitting out in the sun, and my hair used to get yellow, and I know a thing about cockroaches, and I love when kids sit on my lap. I mean, I don't know what this guy's saying half the time, but, I had to go to little Joe while we're talking about the malarkey. But I think that something's being lost here, and I think somebody needs to get a message to Ilhan Omar, to Rashida Tlaib, to Ayanna Pressley, and AOC, because I think sometimes they forget they were put there to fight the establishment, to make sure that we have an opposition to Donald Trump, not join them. And all the time I see tweets like this, they just excuse the behavior of the same thing that put Donald Trump in power.
Well, this is one of the things that there's a philosophical question, no answer yet, right? So being anti-establishment probably means different things to different people, right? Absolutely. And so there's anti-establishment, meaning that I don't like establishments and I'm not a statist, I'm not here for this and that. Or does it mean you don't like the establishment because you're not the establishment? And that's, I think, one of the things that we need to examine when we talk about like being anti-establishment. Does it mean that you want there to be more room for everyone? Like, do you want it to be a little more non-zero sum? Or is it that you're just like, this establishment isn't the one I like? And I think that's something that we have to look at even on the most local of levels. Absolutely. Like, what does going back to what does progressive mean to you? Then next, what does establishment mean to you? Yeah. And looking at it to make sure that it's not ego driven. Yeah. Because I think that's a piece of it that isn't part of the discussion, right? Yeah. Like, there's a lot of, looking at money in politics. One of the things, that, especially having run my own grassroots campaign, that, now the other philosophical question, and going back to campaign finance and who can run, who has access to our structures, right? When you put all these qualifications on what money you'll take, then that really means that you're taking money from individual people. And is it more or less just to take even the smallest quantities of money from people who don't have it, especially if you're running in some of the poorest districts, than it is to take from corporate people or from other places and just be like, look, you can give me money if you want, but know that I will not listen to you and I'm my own person. And that's it, because I don't want to take money from poor people. And so you have to ask yourself, which is more or less just? And like looking at all of this holistically, looking at how much it costs to be part of party politics. I mean, I've seen estimates between $3,000 and $5,000 to go to Milwaukee and looking at, how much it costs, like dues, how much it costs to run your delegate campaign, how much it costs to be part of one of the caucuses, to go to, how much it costs to, drag yourself to, to Iowa, or if you're on the state level even, to the conventions, how much it costs to be part of multiple Democratic clubs. Looking at all of these things, like, what does establishment mean to us? Does it mean that only people who can afford the addition of all of these costs become the establishment? Or does it, what does it mean? And looking at it all holistically, there's no right or wrong answer right now, but it's something that we have to think about. Like, we can't shame people from, out of doing certain things if it means that they won't even get a voice anymore. Yeah. So how do we navigate this?
I mean, it's so hard. It almost feels like we're all still trying to figure it out, because this for too long we've kind of existed in a two-party dichotomy, and we haven't been able to surpass that. And so we don't know what to do when there are dissenting voices, and we need to have more dissent. Absolutely. And that's part of the reason why I also like Tulsi Gabbard, because she's willing to listen to people she doesn't agree with. And I think that is so important. But I think that is actually demonized by a lot of the Democratic establishment. They want to live in their echo chamber. They only want to hear people they agree with. And I think that in itself creates a problem, because we, like, as much as I'm criticizing Ilhan Omar, she has every right to think the way she does. And I agree with you. Some people want a new type of establishment. I think what we can define as something that we consider to be progressive, or something that we consider to be anti-establishment, to me means getting money out of politics. Because you talk about you don't want to take money from poor people. Yes, you don't want to take money from poor people, but essentially you don't want money to be an issue. Money, you don't want to take it from anybody. Everybody should have the same amount of money. They should be publicly funded elections.
Publicly funded,
and that's the bottom line. That way you're not influenced more by a wealthy person than you are by a working class person, but you're influenced by the issues and the people, your constituents, and that's how we move past this.
Yeah. And I think publicly funded elections are the most important thing.
Yeah.
But when it's just really quick too, because I know we got to get on. But when we talk about what is establishment, I think it's who you take that money from. If you're taking money from fossil fuel companies, if you're taking money from the military industrial complex, I don't give a shit if you're going to say, because the military industrial complex is not going to give you money unless you play ball. So you can say, I'm going to take the money, but I'm going to do my own thing. They're not going to give you the money in the first place. The people who get that money from those lobbyists are playing ball. So, like the Houston Astros, they were caught stealing signs. Fam, they got a bunch of scandals coming out.
Yeah.
Okay, so Shauna Burley is great. She's very anti-military industrial complex as a veteran. She said two can play at this game, and let me read Mehdi Hasan. He's a writer for Intercept. I like a lot of his writing, but he said, let's be clear, if you're tweeting in support of this ludicrous #NeverWarren, you're not only dumb, but you're also telling the world that you're okay with kids in cages and bans on Muslims.
That's stupid shit.
Yeah, I mean, you're blaming the voter for standing up against corruption, and I think that's entirely wrong. And then he goes on and on and on about that whole thing, and she said, two can play at this game. If you're tweeting in support of E. Warren, you're not only intellectually challenged, you're telling the world you are a bloodthirsty warmonger who is okay with our soldiers dying in #wars for profit. So, I mean, Elizabeth Warren has terrible foreign policy. We all know this. But not only that, I mean, she's right. Two can play this game. We can all say something like that in relation to our beliefs, and that is a valid point to make. And I think by calling people dumb because they're standing up for saying we're not going to vote for another neoliberal establishment politician, because that's what she's pretty much outed herself to be.
Yeah.
I'm going to backtrack from everything progressive that I initially ran on. And I'm going to co-opt Bernie Sanders' platform, fundraise off of this drama.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to, gaslight it and say I'm the victim here and blah, 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 blah. And so that's the point. That it's just ridiculous. Yeah.
And Mehdi Hasan with the typical establishment move, like that, blaming Donald Trump for the sins that came before him. Yeah, well, you ban Muslims, you know what? Barack Obama used drones to bomb 7 Muslim nations and sending them array. That's why the immigration problem got so big in Europe and whatnot. And then you talk about kids in cages. Well, not only did Barack Obama, and you'll know about this in the North Triangle, you talk about Guatemala, we talk about Honduras, he removed Manuel Zelaya, causing chaos in that country, having them flee over here. And then he also supported politicians like a Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who were getting money from the military-industrial complex, private prisons, and people who were building private detention centers that she admitted to in a debate against Tim Canova. That's who Barack Obama backed. So once again, the red herring of trying to put it all on Donald Trump is another tactic that we see being used here and there. So.
No, one of the things, and like looking at, I know there was earlier some conversation about Working Families Party and, Elizabeth Warren being the endorsed candidate.
Right.
I'll have to find it and send it to you guys at some point if I can find it again. Out of the Philly election, there was some controversy that came out about where that party gets their money from, and some of the links that it has with the Democratic Party establishment and where that money comes from. And so I think that particular election had some candidates who were endorsed by them who were really strong candidates, really like strong progressive candidates. It was historic, but it did bring up that good point about how is that money linked with maintaining the status quo, and how people don't realize that because until I read that and then started to look into it a little more, I had no idea that some of the sources were common between both, and that there could
Right.
be some linked influence there.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I think it's important to acknowledge that
Yeah.
now that we know that it exists.
Yeah, I mean Lizzie's daughter, I believe, had something to do
Amy,
with the
Amy
with
Warren.
the Workers' Party.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and read some of the quotes in favor of Elizabeth Warren dropping out, or at least critical. This is Apante Kanta.
Yeah, Apani Unta.
If your candidate will not shake Sanders' hand after a debate, but will give Trump a standing ovation, what are you #resisting? #Warren drop out. And did you get that up there? Or? Okay. It's at Get Up Peach Pet Free Apante Anta. It's in one of Pasta's little things. Okay. No,
It's on the
it
Warren
says
dropout
Warren
thing.
dropout part right here.
The bottom one, but it's okay.
And anyway, so that's a
David
good quote.
Hildebrand, no?
Because that's an awesome quote. What did he write? I don't know. Trying to see here because we don't have a lot of time. Oh, there he is. David Hildebrand said, Warren is no longer my number 2 choice. I held out for quite a while. Yes, he did, to our disagreements. But if she can be led by the nose by the mainstream media smear tactics and then capitalize on them, she won't be able to lead once in the White House. And that's true. I mean, she capitalized.
We told you so.
We're accepting. Apologies. I'm just kidding, David. I love you.
Good job, Dave. Way to stand up.
Thank you for saying that. Warren, of course, like I said before, she fundraised off of this, which is really offensive in my opinion. It's one of the most offensive things. Let's read Crystal Ball's because she had a really good tweet. Crystal Ball said, when Warren backed HRC over Bernie in 2016, she made her choice of whether to be a change agent or a # player in the game, which she said she was. Now she has decided to knife her friend to the benefit of Biden. Establishment will back establishment. Never forget that. And that's the bottom line. That is, the establishment will back the establishment. A lot of theories right now are that Elizabeth Warren did this because she wants to help Biden out. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she's being influenced by the party elites like the Barack Obamas of the world. We know that there was a Stop Sanders movement. We know that all of this is true. But bottom line is, at the end of the day, she is sort of helping Biden. Either she's going to drop out, either she's going to give him her delegates. Whatever happens, there's going to be unity within that establishment. And unfortunately, a lot of people were expecting her to stand up and unite with Bernie Sanders in the progressive camp of our party. But a lot of us were like, she's not going to do that because past behavior is a really great predictor of future behavior. And the results she gave us in the past, the data said that she wasn't going to do that because she hadn't done it every single time. And so now, we're at a cross point.
Yeah, Lewis Brooks with the Super Chat contribution says, Liz is a DNC lapdog. Probably did it at the DNC direction to help Biden. Still hoping for a VP spot. She is awful. And I just want to reiterate the fact that she sat out on the sidelines in 2016. Okay, when Bernie Sanders needed her most, she did not jump in there. She did what was politically expedient for her, and that was sit back and wait. She also didn't go to Standing Rock the way Tulsi did. You want to talk about this Native American thing? Okay, where was she when she showed up when Barack Obama says, we'll see how this plays out? Where was she? No, Tulsi was there. I think we had little signs along the way to show who was really fighting for the poor people. You know what I'm saying? The poor people we talk about giving those donations to, and who's fighting for the elitist. And Elizabeth Warren has always seemed to be on the side of the elitist at the end of the day. She may appear to be fighting for the little guy, but I don't think she's ever stepped up for the little guy, and she showed her true colors right here.
So where does, just to close out the show, where do you see this primary going?
Just in general?
Yeah.
I honestly think that it's still up in the air because, and it sort of the same sort of idea as I felt about the race on the ground for Council District 14. I think, what happens in TV land, what happens in social media land, versus what happens on the ground. Everything in social media, everything on the news feels a lot more tense than it is. But when you're on the ground, like your day-to-day is very mundane.
Yeah.
And I think that, as activists, we kind of succumb to part of the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Like you don't know what you don't know, but also when you're an expert in something, you forget what it's like not to be.
Yeah. Sure.
And I think that because of that same principle, it's a little more up in the air than I think we realize. And I think that, ground game for everybody's going to be really important. That also means digital ground game. But it means the one-on-one. And I think too, there's a lot of voter education that just needs to be done about how all of this works. For a lot of the people who just are not involved, who are trying to survive, trying to do what they do. And I also think people are smart. They see through BS.
Yeah.
They know what's real and what's not. And going back to this drama, it's manufactured drama. Like, if you love Warren, you're gonna love Warren. Like, if you love Bernie, you're gonna love Bernie, and you're gonna realize this is not the hill we should be dying on right now. We should be fighting for the values that made us love these people for whatever reason we do. And ultimately, it's not going to come down to this one thing.
No.
It's going to come down to, who's putting in the work, and who is actually resonating with people.
Yeah.
And so I think it's wide open. I think I think the media needs to stop putting pictures of Kristen Gillibrand in place of Tulsi Gabbard and Jeff Yang in place of Andrew Yang. That can't be a thing, because that's disinformation. But that's just one example. But it means not manufacturing drama. It means focusing on the issues. And I think in the 2020 decade, right? Because this is just the first election, but it's not going to be the last. And I think that people are tired of this smear politics that happens, and I think we're going to be getting away from it, because like I said, people are smart and they see through all of this.
So I don't think the media focuses on the issue. I think they focus on the scuttlebutt, and a lot will be played out. Jamie, thank you so much for coming in today. Just tell the people what you plan to do really quickly before we wrap it up moving forward. Now that this election is in your rear view, you're going to still go out there. Unfortunately, we might be stuck with De Leon, I guess is what you're telling me. But what do you have planned for the future as an activist, and where can we find you down the road?
So, as an activist, one of the things is talking about what happened on this run. So the reason I've had to suspend the campaign was because we didn't get signatures enough of them. It's not that we didn't get any. Obviously, we had enough to submit. In Los Angeles, you need to submit 500 valid signatures, up to 1,000, and submit a filing fee, or 1,000 valid signatures up to 2,000 with no filing fee. And the thing is, that sounds all well and good, but people don't realize how hard it is. People don't realize that, in perspective, a senatorial candidate for U.S. Senate in California needs 65 valid signatures. Really? For judges, you need 20. Yeah. Like, just in perspective, for an LA city, a hyperlocal race, you need 500 minimum and the filing fee. And yes, for some of those other races, the filing fee is higher. But in order to make it to those signatures, there's people who pay. I ran into, I was personally collecting a lot of signatures myself, because the candidate is always going to be the best person to collect the signatures, because you're doing a lot of voter education for why you have to do that. And they're like, well, why should I sign to give this person ballot access? Why are they worthy of it? And what are they going to do to help the community? And what have they done to help the community? But I was running into people $3.70 a signature. Other candidates told me $5 a signature. Campaigns pay. They pay to get the signatures because it's such an onerous thing. We had an 80.3% acceptance rate, which me being the perfectionist, I'm like, oh, I wish it was 100. But that's actually really high. We didn't have a single one of our sheets thrown out because I was so meticulous about everything. And but I think it's just one way that, we have to we have to normalize. I'm not even going to say lower because we're not trying to lower standards. We want to make sure people aren't buying their way onto the ballot. Yeah. But this isn't the way. This is how you clothesline working candidates. You clothesline everyday people who are trying to represent the community and do the right thing by creating these intense barriers. And you don't know that these exist until somebody runs. And you don't know about what it's like to raise money if you're not an activist, unless somebody you knows runs and explains it to you. There's so many of the people I know who are first-time donors. And so shining a light on this is something that I'm going to be doing. I'll be back on the budget advocates as one of the representatives for Region 8. So I'm hoping that, I wrote a paper on redlining. Hopefully I can write some more that will be released citywide to really continue pushing these. Still a delegate for Assembly District 51. And so doing a lot of voter outreach, specifically about our no vote systems, vsap.lavote.net, because if the outreach that's happening right now is not sufficient. I can't tell you how many times I ran into people who had no idea that they're going to have 11 days to vote in person, that their precincts are going to be changing, that it's going to go from 10,000 voting places to 1,000 of them, and where you can vote, all these things. And doing that outreach is going to be really important, because if we see low voter turnout for this March 3rd primary, I believe that it's going to be because people didn't know what these changes were. Yeah. And they're going to get disenfranchised because of that. And, just continue to do what I've been doing. Yeah. In a lot of ways, nothing changes except that I get some more sleep.
That's
and
well, thank you so much for coming in, and we really appreciate it. And thank you guys for watching. We are going to continue the conversation, obviously, as much as we can.
Yeah, I just want to say, Larry Janney with the Super Chat contribution. Warren is the type of prostitution that Biden was talking about. Shill. I don't know what that means. I don't want to kind of get into it, but that's a great way to end the show on a Super Chat contribution to help us out. For Pasta Jardula,
Fiorella,
Johnny Sue in the 1s and 2s, and Jamie is in the house.
Tijerina. Bye. Come out.
Thank you.